So, welcome everybody to the inaugural interview with a lawyer, in which I will talk to a legal professional who's doing something interesting, innovative, or fascinating with their practice. Today, we welcome John Szymankiewicz, who is an attorney at the Beer Law Center. And I met John on a Zoom meeting for the North Carolina Bar Association's Small Firm Technology Council meeting and found out about his fascinating practice. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My background is kind of interesting. I come to the law sort of from a different world. I'm a lawyer as career 2.0. I spent my undergraduate's actually in chemical engineering, and I spent, 10 or 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry as a project manager and engineer and that sort of stuff. But decided at some point that I wanted a little bit different, fulfilling career and went back to law school at night and got my degree and decided, hey, I want to do something I actually enjoy doing instead of something that just happens to make money.
All right. So you have a niche practice. And I've met attorneys who focus their practice on helping people with very specific needs. And so, for instance, I know of a law firm that who represents landlords of properties with fewer than 10 units. So that, landlord tenant is not so much a niche, but what they do and who they help is a little
Yeah.
bit niche. Or the fund lawyer who I met in Maryland who represents traveling carnivals.
Wow.
The
Okay.
ones who go and set up in the parking lots. And I was thinking, well, there's got to be a lot of legal issues around that. And then I've met lawyers who do just motorcycle accidents, or those who represent people looking for ISP subpoena defense. The ISP subpoena defense lawyer, you Google ISP subpoena defense, he's the only person who comes up. And drone law and things like that.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to have a niche practice?
Um, well, so for me, that niche practice idea, you either have niche clients or you have niche subject matter, right? ISP defense. Or in my case, I represent or work almost exclusively with breweries, wineries, and distilleries, alcohol producers and alcohol retailers. And so for me, it was, I want to work with these people. I've been a home brewer for 20 odd years, and I've always been kind of a beer guy. And had gotten some exposure to the industry just from my enthusiasm, and decided, okay, I want to help people chase this dream, right? And I want to be involved with these folks. There's a common saying, and especially the craft beer community, that the industry is about 99% asshole free. And so I was like, okay, that's the industry I want to work with. And in fact, neat little story. Many years ago, and now you just Google beer trademark disputes, and there's like one filed every week. Somebody's complaining about this or that. Several years ago, there was two breweries, one in Colorado and one in California, that figured out they both had the same name for a beer. And both of their lawyers said, we need to sue the other company. We need to stop this. And the brewers got together and said, no, we're not going to do that. And the beer was actually called Salvation. And so the two brewers got together and made a beer together and called it Collaboration, Not Litigation. And I thought that was a pretty neat story that kind of encapsulated, these are the folks I want to work with. This is the kind of industry that I want to be a part of. So for me, it was, I'm either going to do this or I'm going to do something completely different. This is what I want to do. And that's kind of what I'm going to chase after. Which in my mind, and we're probably going to get into this, comes around to how do you get into having a niche practice? How do you generate that? And I've got some pretty specific thoughts there as well.
Okay. So one of the things that when I've talked to lawyers about, especially I talk to a lot of lawyers who are starting a practice, and I suggest picking a few niches because right now, starting a general practice, it would be very hard to market, especially when there's so many established firms in many of our communities where, the name brand is something that everybody in the town knows. So what do? And So one of the things that they seem to be trepidatious about is, am I going to get bored just practicing in one area of the law? So I thought maybe you could kind of go through what all areas of law do you need to be conversant in for a beer law practice?
Oh, good question. Okay, so that that comes back down to are you going to be focused on a specific topic or a specific group of people? And for what we do, we're focused on that niche client, alcohol producers and sellers. And so for us, I consider us a business generalist with an alcohol overlay. So we do everything from corporate formation, fundraising, of course, federal and state licensing for alcohol production and sales. We do some trademark work. We do mergers and acquisitions for buying and selling, and of course, just a ton of general counsel sort of work for these folks. And then layer on top of that that very specific um, alcohol regulation piece. Because if you don't know that, nobody cares about the rest of this. For us, it's a matter of, oh yeah, you can have anybody form your LLC or do your operating agreement or review a lease or something like that. But we know what's coming down the pike later for you. We know this piece here and how alcohol law affects it. So you want us to do that stuff underneath as well, not just the, hey, can I do this, or what needs to be on this beer label, or something like that. So, for us, the what do you need to know? Well, you start with the alcohol stuff because the rest of it, a lot of it you got from law school. You can figure this stuff out. It's not that hard. And the more you do, the more you obviously get to know it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good. I mean, I think now finally there is one class in Texas or Colorado. I forget where the professor's teaching that actually teaches about alcohol law in law school. There's nowhere to go to learn this stuff. Everybody that does this kind of had to figure it out and make mistakes and do a lot of reading and a lot of talking to people and that sort of stuff. So the foundation for me is understanding the alcohol stuff and then building on everything else you do, everything from secure transactions and sales to basic contract.
Okay. So, and one of the things I really like about your website is that, you don't just represent breweries because it's
Right.
called the Beer Law Center. And so while you have the niche and you have the brand name, your website is written in beautifully plain language, and it makes clear that you represent breweries, but any other alcohol producer as well. So if you're a refinery or, whatever. So that's one of the things that I think is really important about thinking about, describing your niche is not getting too niche
Right.
because you do other things besides represent breweries. And then I guess the other question is, without having gone to your website, if somebody says you're the Beer Law Center, do you have a lot of people think you represent clients for DUI?
Oh, yes. Yes. And the answer is, oh, can you represent me for this DWI? Hell no. I don't want to do that. I try not to go to court if I can at all help it. We're transactional. And so we're always like, no, no, no. We help you with the business of alcohol, not the effects. That's somebody else.
Right.
But I will say, going back to the name Beer Law Center, probably a marketing mistake on my part early on because it's got legs as a brand. People intuitively get what we do, but we now have to spend quite a bit of time and effort saying we're not just beer. We also do this. We also do this. We do kombucha and mead and wine and all these other things. And we do the seller side, even if you're not producing, so your local bar or whatever. So from that standpoint, that was our initial focus. And that's what we said, okay, this is what we're going to go out to generate our practice around, is around breweries. And then we have, obviously expanded over time to do other things. And that's something that, if you're starting a niche practice, you really have to struggle with. How narrow do I want to be and still be wide enough to capture clients that may not be or may be on the fringe of what the subject matter you're looking at?
Interesting. So I think the Beer Law Center is actually part of a larger practice, right?
Right.
Matheson and Associates. And so, I guess Beer Law Center is a sub brand. Matheson Associates also has another sub brand, right?
We've actually got a couple. We've,
Okay.
so Matheson and Associates is the larger law firm. Beer Law Center is basically me, an associate and a paralegal. We've also got a family law side and a criminal defense side. And what we wanted to do was focus focus teams around a specific area, a niche, if you will, but be able to say, but we're not just that. We're not so small that we can only do that for you. So we capture some other clients out there, and I've gotten some from time to time just general business clients that may have even come in through one of our other areas, and that's helpful, but it helps us push our marketing dollars where they're most going to make a difference, and that's in those sort of niche brands.
Yep, absolutely. It's much easier to market with some specific keywords, I think.
Right.
And it's funny because maybe you do a new sub brand called Fermented Drink Law.
Yeah, right. Something like that. Yeah.
Because I've actually become a fan of kombucha. I was not before. We talked about before we started taping. As you get older, your taste buds refine,
right,
decline. But I tried it before a long time ago. I thought it was disgusting, and now I love it. Anyhow, so are there other beer lawyers?
There are. There's a lot of folks out there practicing in the space. For most lawyers, they have an alcohol practice as part of their overall practice. There are far fewer of us that dedicate our business to that, or that's all we do. I think probably in the country, there's only about 24, maybe a little less than 24, that focus exclusively on alcohol. There are some amazing lawyers that have this as sort of part of their practice and tend to focus on alcohol litigation or distribution and representation of the middle tier of sellers and producers. So yeah, there are folks out there. And when I first hung out the shingle for Beer Law Center, I probably got, 5-6 calls a month. Oh my God, that sounds awesome. How do I get to be a beer lawyer? And my normal answer was, first, marry well, because there's no money in this. Every one of your clients is a small business, and they're looking very closely at hopefully not needing to have a lawyer. So you're constantly educating on, well, here's the value I can bring. And I'll admit, it's a sexy topic. It is a pain a lot of times.
So I was going to ask you most challenging parts of having a niche practice. It sounds like there's a number of challenges. So I think part of probably your process is, what's worked best and what hasn't worked in terms of marketing your practice.
Okay. So my personal belief on marketing is you have to go to where your clients are. And my particular industry, the craft beer, craft alcohol industry, tend to be, I won't say insular, but they tend to want to see somebody who's committed to the industry, not committed to getting a hire. So for us, the things that work for us is we do a lot of writing. We've gotten off track the last year or so, but blogs every week on topics that we're seeing or new stuff that's coming out. We even wrote a book a couple of years ago. We're on a second a new book and that was specifically for breweries. We're working on one for distilleries. Probably need to do a second edition of our brewery book, and then going to where your clients are, not looking to market to them. So for us, it was about going to some of the conferences and just walking around and talking to people and meeting folks and engaging in conversations. And then if they ask, give them a business card, or not being that hard sell, or practicing I don't do really well with that. Was it the 30-second elevator speech that a lot of networking folks tell you to do? For us, it's about putting out a lot of information and not trying to hoard. You need to hire me before I can tell you about that. It's just pushing out, that's this. Well, here's what I think about that. Here's what I do. There's different schools of thought on this as well. But for example, we don't charge for an initial consult. So I'd say, I don't know, 20% of the calls that I get, that I spend an hour or more with these folks, they're nowhere near ready to hire anybody. They're 2, 3 years out from doing anything. Or if I'm very lucky, sometimes I convince them not to do something because they don't understand the complexities, right? Or, well, you can't do that because of this. And there's this other thing that's a problem here. And, oh, I thought it would be just like opening a dry cleaners. Well, no, it's not, because of X, Y, and Z. So for us, it's about, I guess, for lack of a better word, being genuine.
What advice would you give to a firm or a lawyer who's contemplating adding a niche practice?
Um, First thing that I would think about there is, if you don't already have the book of business in that area, then you need to be patient, because it takes time to do that. When I decided, okay, I'm going to be Beer Law Center, and this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, this niche, this idea, that's what I marketed towards. That's what I did. But I tell people, for a long time, I practiced what I call threshold law, which is whatever kind of problem comes over the threshold, that's the kind of law I practice. And I did a lot of work that I had no interest in, so I could keep the lights on and pay the bills while I focused and marketed on what I wanted to do. And it probably took a good 3, maybe 4 years before I was able to whittle down all that other stuff to just what I wanted to do. So yeah, and I've talked to folks, they're like, oh, I want to start a trademark boutique practice. Okay, there's a lot of trademark lawyers out there that are working on that stuff. One, you have to have a particular angle, or why you instead of somebody else. But the other one is, that's hard to develop a name and a reputation, a market for, if you're not already in that space. So be patient about trying to build up to that niche practice, and don't expect, oh, I'm going to hang out, Trademark Law Center next week, and it's going to be profitable as a brand within, a year. I think that's unlikely in a lot of cases.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk to lawyers who are starting out or contemplating adding a niche practice, especially if that practice tends to be either contingency or has any litigation that's going to be ongoing, is again thinking about, what am I going to do to keep the lights on in the meantime? And so pulling out some either unbundled services or some flat fee, discrete types of things that you can do. So, or review employment contracts, or things like that you can build that niche while pulling in some actual work that keeps you going. Especially, I had a lawyer who, she used to work for the SEC, and then she went into private practice and started representing whistleblowers and people in SEC defense. And a lot of, obviously she has to be fairly picky about the cases she takes, and they're also usually pretty long going. So we talked about some of the things that she could pull in terms of employment type of work, where it was more of a unbundled or kind of flat fee specific thing that she could do to keep going while she was developing a practice. She also, just for what it's worth, in terms of getting in front of people, she developed a kind of a reputation in talking about and kind of deconstructing blockchain and how it worked, which was not specific to her practice necessarily, but just something she was interested in. But because of that, she's been so exposed through news media and stuff like that, that it's been a good thing for her firm as well. So there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but I think patience and not expecting it to happen right away, and having some way to pay the bills while you're developing the niche is all something that definitely needs to be contemplated, especially if you're just starting out. I think if you're already have an established practice and you decide to add something like that, and now the guy who does the ISP subpoena defense, he already had a general practice and was pretty successful. It's just that he kept getting questions about this. And so that's another way, I guess, to develop a niche, is you're getting a lot of questions about something that's not your everyday Google search. So,
right. And just like going to get clients, you go where they are, you go where the work is, right? So if you're seeing people asking about specific issues, it's because there's a need, right? And so how do you meet that need? Or maybe better yet, do you want to?
Right.
And I think there are a lot of folks out there who, like you said, maybe either in a small firm or in a larger firm for that matter, that have some part of this business, some part of their practice that they want to make all of their practice, right? And that's a hard leap to make too, whether you're staying inside the same firm or if you're going to, hang out your own shingle or go outside. And you go, okay, I've got, 50% of my work is in, I'm going to pick on trademark again, is on and trademark stuff. And I'm going to go start a trademark boutique practice. Great. 50% is not 100% of your time. So how do you keep, like I said, keep the lights on while you get the rest of that business to get where it needs to be?
Yep. Now, I do know a guy who's been working on it for quite some time, and he represents creatives specifically. And he started out with, he was basically the Etsy lawyer.
Okay, yeah.
So, it's certainly doable. I know lots and lots of lawyers who have done that. So you've done this successfully. It takes some time and patience and certainly some creativity and figuring out how to market. And again, I think, communicating with your potential clients in a non-salesy way, which I think lawyers are pretty good at. I think actually lawyers are terrible at sales.
Fair, fair, yeah.
And so, you don't even have to walk a thin line. Just talk to people.
Yeah.
And, I think that's the best way. And then again, generating content so that people find you when they're going and Googling a question, and you actually come up with content and not hire me. And
Right.
I think that's a much better way of doing it these days. So, John, thanks so much. That's all the time we have. And I really appreciate you kind of sharing how you started the Beer Law Center
Yeah.
and your thoughts about niche practice.
Well, thanks for having me on. I had a lot of fun.